Welcome back, everyone. This is our fourth and final session, and I'm excited to present our next speaker. We will now hear from another champion of U.S.-China relations from the halls of Congress, Senator Jacky Rosen from the great state of Nevada. Senator Rosen serves on she chairs the Commerce, Science, and Transportation Subcommittee on Tourism, Trade, and Export Promotion, and where she supports investing and promoting international travel to the U.S., particularly in what's been a very difficult 18 months for the industry. So I hope you'll help me in welcoming Senator Jacky Rosen.
Hello, I'm Senator Jacky Rosen, and I'm proud to represent the great state of Nevada. I want to thank the U.S.-Asia Institute and the Las Vegas Sands for creating this dialogue series. Travel and tourism, well, they're the lifeblood of our economy here in Nevada. Our airports and hotels have been the gateway to the Silver State for millions of domestic and international tourists and business travelers, including a significant number from Asia. In 2019, the travel and tourism industry was responsible for 29% of the gross domestic product nationally, and within Nevada, tourism supported over 430,000 jobs. This pandemic and its resulting economic slowdown has hit Nevada particularly hard. It brought our travel and tourism-heavy economy to a screeching halt and decimated the jobs that this industry supports. The travel slowdown has meant job losses at our amazing hotels and casinos, in our world-class convention halls, and in our airports, and within the whole ecosystem of small businesses that depend on the hospitality industry. The COVID-19 pandemic contributed to the worst downturn the tourism industry has ever experienced in my state. According to the U.S. Travel Association, international inbound travel to the United States decreased by more than 75% in 2020. International travel to Las Vegas was hit particularly hard, dropping nearly 80%. In order to fully recover from the pandemic and turn the corner, we must invest and promote international travel to the U.S. at a greater level than ever before. In my role as chair of the Senate Commerce Committee Subcommittee on Tourism, Trade, and Export Promotion, we will help the hospitality industry bounce back. I will work tirelessly to support the travel and tourism industry's recovery, and I will highlight the challenges that travel-centered businesses face, and I'll continue advocating for critical aid for travel, tourism, and hospitality workers and businesses in Nevada and across our country. With the recent news of easing international travel restrictions between the U.S. and 33 countries, including China, to the United States, I'm confident that we are on the road to recovery together.
Thank you, Senator Rosen, for your wonderful leadership in that important message. And next, we will hear from one of Senator Rosen's colleagues in the Senate. I'm so pleased to welcome Senator Steve Daines of Montana, who serves on the Finance Committee, as well as the Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs and Energy and Resources Committees. He brings with him decades of corporate experience, including 6 years living and working in China. So his perspective on U.S.-China relations is very helpful in his role as co-chair of the U.S.-China Working Group. So he's a perfect speaker for our event today, and it's an honor to welcome Senator Daines.
Well, a warm welcome to the U.S.-China Regional Dialogue Series Forum on tourism, hospitality, and cultural exchange. And thank you to the U.S.-Asia Institute for inviting me to share a few words. Having a productive and open dialogue between the United States and China is critical. Between our two countries, we have the world's two largest economies, and it's clear that the U.S.-China relationship is too big to fail. And while serious challenges and issues exist, ranging from national security and human rights to trade, maintaining people-to-people exchanges will continue to be very essential. And I'm no stranger to the importance of the relationship between the United States and China. In fact, I lived in Guangzhou back in the 90s for 6 years working for Procter & Gamble, where I helped launch one of the first American consumer products in China, which ultimately grew to be one of the most successful American companies selling to the Chinese consumer. And throughout my time in Congress, I've led multiple Senate trips to China to discuss important trade policies that will help level that playing field for farmers and ranchers and ensure the United States remains competitive and has access to the China market. Back in Montana, I've also hosted former Ambassador Shui to Big Sky Country to see our pristine public lands and our national parks and discuss expanding trade and people-to-people exchanges between the United States and China through agriculture and tourism. And I look forward to maintaining an open and a constructive dialogue between our two countries. And your work will continue to be an essential part of that effort. So thanks again for inviting me to participate, and enjoy the rest of your conference.
Thank you, Senator Daines. We appreciate your commitment to people-to-people exchanges, as well as to bilateral agricultural trade and the tourism industry. Thanks for everything you do to keep the lines of communication open. And now we'll hear from Congresswoman Susie Lee, who serves Nevada's 3rd Congressional District. She is a member of the Appropriations Committee and the Women's Veterans Task Force. Representative Lee knows the importance of U.S.-China trade and tourism in creating jobs in her district. And that's why I'm so excited to hear from her today. Let's welcome Congresswoman Lee.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Congresswoman Susie Lee from Nevada's 3rd Congressional District. I hope you're all having a productive and insightful symposium. And for those of you who are in Las Vegas, I hope you're taking the time to see the magic of Las Vegas in action. Whether it's the bright lights and the sights, the grand hotels and casinos, the performers, the world-class restaurants, or the iconic Las Vegas showgirls with the feather headpieces, Vegas is a magical place. But behind the scenes, it's not magic. It's the hard work of thousands of workers and Nevadans that I represent, who tirelessly work to support the city and transform it into the tourist capital of the world that it is every day and night. Our economy is built on travel and tourism and hospitality. So I'm sure, as you can imagine, that means our city and our entire state were particularly hit hard during the pandemic. In an average year, we welcome over 40 million visitors from across the United States and the world. And when that all came to a halt, it was devastating for our economy and our families. But we are proud to be on the upswing and driving our recovery forward. And while I couldn't be with you all today in person, I'm so thrilled that many of you are able to witness the magic of Las Vegas in person and safely. I want to extend my gratitude to His Excellency Ambassador Qin Gong for taking the time to be here to build and grow our shared cultural exchange. Our city and our communities here in Las Vegas illustrate a broader picture of the importance of the bilateral relationship between our nations. In 2019, here in Nevada, our exports to China supported over 8,500 American jobs. And our goods exports to China jumped 235% in 2020. There is so much economic potential between our nations, and I know the conversation that you all are having will continue to grow and develop. As we look down the end of this tunnel of this pandemic, I look forward to working together to grow our relationship across trade and tourism. This conversation is a step to making that happen. And that's especially true as we come out of this pandemic. And while the scope and size of our cultural exchange has not reached its full potential, we are all well on our way to ending this pandemic and getting there. Together, worldwide, over 6 billion doses of the vaccines have been administered. And it's taking the efforts of all of our workers, scientists, and researchers to make that happen, keeping our world healthy, and it's healing our international economy. With continued conversation and diplomacy, we can grow past the challenges facing international tourism and hospitality under COVID-19. Travel restrictions already are relaxing worldwide, and our economy and our families are bouncing back as a result. So thank you all for being here. I look forward to continuing the conversation, and I'm wishing you all a wonderful symposium.
Well, thank you, Congresswoman Lee. We appreciate you sharing your perspective on the U.S.-China relationship, on travel and tourism, and we're thankful for your leadership. And now we're ready for our final session of this event. I'm so excited about this armchair discussion on workforce development because education and workforce development truly are a terrific base to promote positive dialogue and build understanding between the United States and China. We are so fortunate to have with us three luminaries in the fields of hospitality and tourism, education, and workforce development. Our speakers include Stowe Schumacher, who is the Dean of the William F. Hara College of Hospitality at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, Bernhardt, the Interim Vice President of Economic Development at the University of Las Vegas, and Billy Vasiliadis, who is CEO of R&R Partners. I'll kick it off by introducing Billy, and then he'll do the honors of introducing Stowe and Bo. And it's so wonderful to welcome you here today, Billy, to our event. From guiding the creation and implementation of R&R's iconic "What Happens Here Stays Here" ad campaign for the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority, to advising U.S. presidents, senators, and governors, to leading some of the most high-profile reputation management issues for individuals and companies. Billy is a widely respected businessman and leader in the hospitality and tourism industry, and we are so pleased to have you here with us today. And so now, Billy, the floor is yours to make introductions and kick off the discussion.
Thank you so much. I almost feel like y'all are playing that nursery school game of which one of these doesn't belong, you know, where there's a dog and a cat and a frying pan. I'm clearly the frying pan in this group. These two extremely distinguished hospitality scientists are going to give us their wisdom today. And I'm very fortunate because I'm the student with these two professors. Dr. Schumacher came from Cornell, graduated Cornell, PhD, which is interesting because when I started school, the two top schools for then called hotel administration were Cornell and UNLV. And I think the third might've been Michigan. Yep. So we beat Cornell for the bidding, which I think says a lot for UNLV. He is so knowledgeable in so many areas, from doing research on marketing campaigns, which scares people like me, their efficiencies and their failures. He does quite a bit, has quite a bit of data on customer satisfaction. He's now working on health tourism, which both pre-pandemic and now is a growing part of the hospitality industry. And he's leading one of the top schools in the world in training young people to get into hospitality, particularly in this area. Bernhardt is his day job is now to be the Vice President of Economic Development, but he's kept his other job, which is to lead the International Gaming Institute in both research and policy. Bo, I would bet, is the most sought after expert in the world when it comes to both the development of gaming regulations, advising companies on the feasibility of gaming, on local cultures, on the types of activities and community activities and national activities that gaming companies need to be involved in, whether they're in China or any other part of the world, so that they fit comfortably and are welcomed by their guests, by their hosts. So what I'd like to do is, gentlemen, is kick this off with this. I come from the point of view of the traveler and the customer, right? And obviously, we're training people to take care of those customers. And one thing we know is this, both pre-pandemic and through this pandemic and coming out of this pandemic, we have such a diversity of travelers like probably never before in our history. I think the biggest generation gap came between the millennials and the Gen Xers that we've seen since the 60s. What does that mean? How they decide to travel, where they travel, what their expectations of travel are, vary greatly. And training in workers in hospitality, greeters, hosts, and how to identify the differences, how to host those differences is going to be dramatically important. Secondly, These travelers are very, and you're going to hear this word from me a lot, and I'm tired of it myself, are seeking authentic and real experiences. Their expectations are they're going to go someplace and see and experience what they read and what they saw before they made the decision online of where they were going to go. Thirdly, the idea of a broad spectrum of cultural availabilities and opportunities in their travels, even to the point of color choices and decor and art. They don't want to see a monotonous single piece. They want to experience the cultures of the world. They want East and West to meet. They want to understand and appreciate. They chase history, they chase culture, they chase art, they chase food. So with that, I'll turn it over to the two professors. How will training have to change? How will education have to change? And how is that change important globally, not just market by market, particularly in the relationships between these two great countries?
So thank you very much for the introduction and really setting up a nice conversation about education and training. I would add one more piece to your litany of items, and that is that the customers today are very knowledgeable. So they come in with certain expectations. And when I started in the hospitality business, it was great because our customers weren't that knowledgeable. So whatever we did, they were very excited. Now they come in and they go, wow me. And we have to wow them so that they will come back. And I think from a training and education point of view, that's what we really focus on. And I want to kind of start just saying one thing about hospitality education is that I've often heard when I met a gentleman on an airplane and I said, you know, what do you do? Because I'm one of these people that talks to people on an airplane. And he said, I'm a laser physicist and I measure the speed of light. And he said, what do you do? And I said, I'm in hospitality. And he kind of gave like a little smirk, because of hospitality. And I said, well, wait a second, let's think about hospitality. Let's think about it as rocket science. I said, what are the characteristics of rocket science? One, you have one chance to make it right. Two, it takes a lot of different types of skill sets to make that rocket go off, from scientists to laborers to computer programmers. And it takes a lot of pre-planning. And I said, doesn't that kind of sound like a wedding? You get one chance to make it right and all the hands that have to go in it to put it all together. And that's what I think we have to always want to focus on. And I think for hospitality, people often think, well, this is the job I do before I figure out what I want to do. And what I would argue, and I think we're beginning to see that, is hospitality is just this incredible career that doesn't matter what your mom or dad did, we can give you with the proper education, we can change a life that will just be unimaginable.
Yeah, I love your emphasis on changing family trees. We've been able to, at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, where we do have one of the world's top hospitality programs, to do that with our friends in China for generations.
Yes.
Now. When you talk about it, doesn't matter what your mom does, what your dad does. I'm reminded of a story as a longtime professor at UNLV during office hours. Office hours is, of course, when students can come in outside of the hours of the classroom and typically talk about what they're concerned with in the class itself. And I always ask the students in office hours, what got you here, right? And normally they start with, well, we have a test on Friday and I'm really worried about it. And I say, no. How did you arrive here in Las Vegas, studying what you're studying? And the best story I've ever had came from a young Chinese woman who grew up in not a huge Chinese city, but in an environment that had a hotel or two. And her mother, who happened to be a single mother, was running one of the hotels in her community. And she said, I have to tell you, Dr. Bo, for some reason they always use my first name, Dr. Bo, I have a really cool story of how I arrived here. My mother, who was running a hotel back in China, came up to me one day, and she just worked so hard every day. And one day she arrived, came through the door, and she smiled at me and she said, today is the day. And I said, well, what do you mean today's the day, Mom? I don't understand. And she said, today's the day. I have been saving my entire life, working really hard for you to save money, to send you to study hospitality, tourism, and to learn this trade, to learn this great industry that we all love. And today is the day that I have saved enough money to send you to the United States. And if you don't mind, I'd like to tell you a little bit more. I've done some research, and it turns out there's this wonderful hospitality program at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And today I've saved enough money to send you to the University of Nevada, Las Vegas's hospitality program. And I immediately thought, oh man, do not mess up this class, Bo. Talk about pressure, right? Like, this is somebody who traveled from the other side of the planet to take this course. But those are the kinds of classrooms we are really privileged to get to oversee, I feel like. I mean, in pre-pandemic times, were we at like 25, 30% international with a huge proportion from China?
Yeah, about 23% of our students in the hospitality college are from Asia, and the majority of those are from China. And what's been great about that is they come here, they do their internships, in our program. Just to talk a little bit about what we do, is we have an internship, we have work experience. Every Chinese student or international student who studies in the US can stay for an extra year on an OPT. And so we work very closely with a lot of the international firms. So students can come study hospitality, learn everything they need to learn about hospitality, work for a year, and then go home either to work for companies within China or to start their own companies. And one of the students that I was a mentee to from Hainan Island, who Bo and I both have visited, he's very much an entrepreneur and has started building his own hotels in Hainan. One of his classmates is starting building hotels on mainland China, starting off with smaller properties, but just continuing to grow. And I think, we think about the hospitality business, it is a business, but it's all about creating great service, creating great experiences, creating all the things that Billy talked about, and doing it in a way, in an entrepreneurial way, that your career can just be amazing.
I'm sorry.
So I just want to ask one follow-up to that. So Asian students come here, Chinese students come here, we educate them, we train them, et cetera. How does our curriculum change based on what we learn from them, what we learn from Chinese culture, Chinese hospitality, et cetera? How are those merged? And again, I truly do believe future travelers are going to be looking for that spectrum of culture when they travel.
That's a great question. And our curriculum has changed constantly since I've been the dean. And a lot of it is, I think where it begins to change is in the terms of the types of questions students ask us as faculty. When I don't want to say when I was in school, but I will say it because obviously I was in school a long time ago. The professor was kind of the sage on the stage. And we would just take notes and listen and regurgitate whatever the professor told us. Students today come in with much more knowledge, much more experience, and we've become, as faculty, much more kind of the guide on the side. And we have group projects, right? And we have international students working with US students. And so when two different cultures work together, different questions come up. And then those questions come back to us as faculty. And then as faculty, we begin to think, well, maybe we really need to be thinking about how we teach these courses differently. And we also have the advantage that we have, many of our international students go on, earn their PhD. And so we do have a fair amount of percentage of our faculty are from China and other Asian countries. So that helps bring in a whole different perspective.
Yeah, I love the moments that happen in our classrooms all the time where you have a student from Guangzhou sitting next to a student from Des Moines, Iowa, right? And the interchanges that happen in the classroom, in a well-facilitated classroom like that, I always feel like I'm just kind of along for the ride. And there's so much learning that happens as exchange in a program as dynamic as UNLV. And one of the other things I would observe about the curriculum here, Billy, and you certainly observe this, it's just so much more rigorous because it's so much more competitive an environment, right? So right before COVID, tourism hit 10% of the global economic pie for the first time in human history. As the billions upon billions of human beings who inhabit this planet Earth, 10% of all the dollars, yen, euros, whatever that we spent were spent on moving ourselves from one part of the Earth to another part of the Earth for business or for pleasure. And for a long time, I think Las Vegas has enjoyed its reputation as a global intellectual capital of that. Certainly we have a lot of ideas and we export a lot of those ideas. But I think what's happened with that global competitiveness is we've learned how much we can learn from others, how much we can learn from, remember our trip to Hainan and how much we were amazed by the Hawaii of China. But then very quickly what happens is the beautiful cultural exchange thing where over dinner, maybe over a few drinks, you're starting to realize, wow, we're like sister communities. You in Hainan, of course, know what it's like to be the folks who are backstage trying to put on the front stage a really good show for all of these, again, in Hainan, Chinese tourists, here in Las Vegas, right, tourists from Hainan and elsewhere, right, all over the world. We both have that sensibility of what it's like to grow up in, to live in, to work in a tourist town, and work really, really hard at putting on that show. There are unique stresses associated with that. And once you start to share those strengths and those vulnerabilities over dinners, it's some of my favorite days on the job.
So one of the observations I've had, and I've kind of been to cold water in the room a number of times on this, is when this is over and we get back to normal, I don't believe we're going back to anything. And I think it was going that way anyhow. I mean, all the pandemic did was accelerate certain things. So you got two large economies in the world. So while culturally, et cetera, the efforts and all that are wonderful, they're both going to make economic decisions in a changing world where virtual versus human contact, whether it's in meetings, whether it's in checking into a hotel. What do you perceive is going to be the greatest challenges in the hospitality industry and for hospitality workers as we get to new normal, as there is this generational split and also attitudinal split in I want to register for my mobile from the cab on the way there to I want to be greeted by a human being that says, thank you for coming to my hotel. How does that balance happen? Where does it happen? And how significant is that challenge going forward?
It's a great question. I think one of the biggest challenges facing our industry is that young people today don't look at it as hospitality necessarily as a career. They're so used to being on their phone that they think they can just have a job where they can be on their phone and they can stay at home. And showing and letting people know, young people know that this is a career that can totally change your life. And as Bo mentioned, change your family tree. A good example here is, Las Vegas Sands celebrated their 20th anniversary last year. And they had a party for the 800 people that were there on day one, who had been with the company for over 20 years. And over those 20 years, they had dealers who worked their way up into senior leadership positions, but they also had dealers who stayed as dealers, who were able to send their kids to medical school and to college and totally changed their lives. And I think what we need to do in hospitality and what we try to do at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, is really show the opportunities that if you like hospitality and you like math, you can go into the data science side of predicting consumer behavior in terms of their willingness to pay X amount of money. If you like the interaction, you can be on the event side. If you're very entrepreneurial, you can create a ghost kitchen and you can understand technology. So what we need to do as the hospitality industry is show people that this is a career can be very sexy, can be very fun, and it can be equally as challenging as working for Google or Amazon, which are kind of the buzz companies right now.
I think there's no doubt we're not going back to where we were. We oversee an innovation facility called Blackfire Innovation. Blackfire is the name of our state gemstone. The university has an innovation hub out there. And one of the companies that's joined us there is Zoom. Zoom has Zoom carts, which think like, super Zoom capacity that they would like to see in every hotel room, every convention center like this one. But I also, and I might, by contrast, be the optimistic golden retriever wagging his tail here. I don't think there's any substitute for human contact. We are sitting in one of the finest convention facilities in the world. And downstairs from us is an expo of people who are so grateful that for the first time in 2 full calendar years, they all get to see each other. And they get to go to dinner together and they get to have exchanges of ideas, even across business borders, right? Which is often the most productive kind of exchange, right? 2 competitors having dinner and talking about the ways in which they're each trying to solve the problems of their day. And I just think there's no substitute for it in the end. I think once more, when you think about the ways in which Las Vegas companies, and we are again in a facility where this was absolutely the case, exported some of the great ideas of Las Vegas and came up with and then exported. And I think about Singapore. Singapore is a facility, obviously, in the Marina Bay Sands is the facility, I should say, that really listened to Singapore's tourism board and the Singaporean people more generally when they launched one of the most iconic buildings in all of Asia. Singapore has been for generations, for hundreds of years, a place where the world goes to meet, dating back to like the spice trades, right? And Las Vegas Sands, again, the company that set up shop there, said, we hear you, Singapore. We know you are a place that loves to convene the world. And what we will provide to you is a place that facilitates that better than any place else, right? And that has been embraced, of course, by the Chinese tourist ever since. It's one of the most successful exported businesses in the history of Las Vegas. And I'm one who thinks we're going to go back to a different world, but there are elements of face-to-face, F2F, is that the way the kids say it these days?
Yeah.
So is that how you, when you're texting
Yes.
your students, right? That doesn't go away, and it's so crucial.
Oh, I don't disagree with that. I just think we're gonna have to modify the way we approach, greet, and reach customers and train our workforces because the physical interaction will be more dependent on the needs and the wants of the traveler than ever before. Again, because of the differences generationally and now the revolution in technology over the last 20 years, some of them, there'll be a variety of expectations. So your guys' job, I think, gets tougher in that they need to be trained in a variety of ways to greet and to host, to entertain, to interact, to educate, to inform than they ever had before. Multiple platforms, both face-to-face, but also we can't be fearful of virtual, especially if we agree that a great virtual presence eventually becomes a great interpersonal presence.
Yeah, I think the thing that and that becomes so critical is really as the world does become smaller and we do see more and more people that are our guests that don't look like who we are. How do we educate our students, think about it as some consumers, of the importance of diversity, the importance of understanding others, the importance of not judging, but understanding. And that comes about really through, when we have international students coming to the US, when we have US students going over to China. I had a student that grew up in Las Vegas, had never been out of Las Vegas. I sent her to China for a semester, and I got her a job in Xi'an, where the Terracotta Warriors are. I think I pronounced that properly. And she ended up working in a hotel there for 6 months, and she came back totally changed. And those kinds of exchanges, and that's why this forum is so important, because we did talk a lot about tourism. We talked a lot about exchanges. And I think the more we can do to facilitate that people change, especially at the young age, it just has incredible opportunities. And I have students that I've taught who now, doing revenue management, and they're Chinese students and they live in Shanghai. And those kinds of things are what really brings it together.
Right.
One of the things under your leadership, Stowe, that I've really appreciated about the UNLV Hotel School gets to your point, Billy, about how hard this job is and how do you deal with a dynamic and rapidly changing, almost impossibly quickly changing world of technology and so forth, is what I would call the UNLV Hotel School approach, which I think is what's happening more generally in higher education around the world. And here's what I would call I'll call it the Schumacher approach in your honor here. But if you graduate from our hotel school, you have to have upwards of 1,000 hours, not in a classroom, not in front of in a 300 student auditorium, a professor reading from yellowed notes that he's been reusing every year. You have to be out and learning in a world where you're suddenly being asked, can we connect this to Zoom? Can we pivot on a dime and make sure that technology is incorporated here? And yeah, I think about that. I mean, so we have an author here in the United States, Malcolm Gladwell, who says that 10,000 hours is required to excellence, right? Whether you're the Beatles or a Nobel Prize winning physicist. And when you graduate from UNLV, you're a 10th of the way there already, right? To being excellent at tourism. But more importantly, once more, the best way for our curriculum to adjust is by incorporating again and continue to encourage this get out of the classroom, get out there into the world. You might, if you're working in a Las Vegas hotel, if you're working the front desk, you might meet 100 people from 35 US states and 45 countries, right, on one shift, right? It's just a remarkable educational opportunity to deal with the world's complexities, technological and anthropological, I think.
Well, I think the other amazing opportunity in terms, again, of cultural appreciation and understanding is going to be the ability also to work virtually together for the same company. So you've got a student working in Asia, a data scientist or a data person working in China, and they need to communicate their findings to someone in the United States. They're colleagues. They may be virtual colleagues, but they're colleagues. There needs to be a level of understanding and appreciation of the other person's challenges, the other person's issues, a respect for their information and for their knowledge due. So I don't look at this new virtual thing as being an obstacle to greater cultural appreciation and understanding. I think it's actually a vehicle towards it. I look at conventions now, right? And international travel right now is still shaky. Coming out of it, will it be? No, of course, it's going to get a lot better. But businesses have now also made financial decisions how much they want to travel and how much they want to spend on travel. If the potential of taking a great product convention and making an East Coast, East-West, towards a simultaneous convention in Beijing and Las Vegas, let's say, that's introducing 8,000 new products to the world, that's being shown in real time, and where people can be there physically in the tens of thousands, but also in the hundreds of thousands, learn and participate virtually, I think is a tremendous opportunity, both for business and for building these relationships that are harder to build on a 24-hour plane trip.
It can enhance our capacity to connect, certainly at a quantitative level with more people. So I gave a keynote just a couple of weeks ago that sort of reflects this, where you can suddenly now speak to thousands of people on the screen, right? But in a way that I wouldn't have been able to, a few years back. And one of the things that was really interesting to me about doing this, and we're academics, we get up and talk in front of a whole lot of audiences. But in this particular historical moment, it really struck me as we were connecting over a screen that every single one of us on planet Earth, for the first time in my lifetime, are going through the same, or at least a very similar moment in history, right? COVID is something that has hit all of us, all of the billions and billions of people on planet Earth in a time when it feels like sometimes we're getting more divided. And all of us are feeling it. And what was really cool in that environment was, as we shared and discussed, again, different countries from all over the world, all of us were going through a similar sort of, I would call it like a post-traumatic funk, right? And by opening up about that and expressing that and having a moment where you can say, are you guys dealing with that in Santiago, Chile? How about you guys in Holland? What's going on, again, in Hong Kong or in Beijing? That's an amazing thing. And given that we have, I believe, an opportunity right now, given that all of us are going through this same traumatic thing to sort of bond and connect, I think it's fabulous that we can use technology.
I think, look, we've all been on Zoom, we've all been on Google Meet, and we've all had our cat or our pet walk across the screen, right? And suddenly we become human, right? We become, this is who I really am. They see the background of your house if you don't have the fancy screensaver. And suddenly now you're dealing with a real person. And that builds that relationship that you might, and then when you meet face to face, the first question is, how's your pet, right? Not how can I sell you something? And then builds that relationship. And that's the people to people exchange. And, we at UNLV, we have an online master's degree program where we have students from actually Las Vegas Sands in Singapore working with students, in the US. And so you have to deal with the time zones and the time changes. And that's really the world. So technology is an enabler. And I agree with you, Billy. It's a way to enable a relationship to start. So now when we get together, we can be much more productive, and that face-to-face becomes so much more important.
How, obviously part of what you guys are outstanding at is creating the standards for hospitality, right? So those need to be, I think, fairly global, fairly consistent in order to successfully host and greet and treat. how do you do that, set those sort of global standards that everybody needs to achieve, but at the same time, customize those culturally depending on where that student is coming from and where they're going to go? Because the value needs will be different, right?
Yeah.
While the physical needs, the tangible needs all probably may be the same. I want to have a clean room. I want to have a good experience. There's a difference in expectation from culture to culture. How do you merge and meld those two things?
So that's great. So what we've done in the hospitality college here at UNLV is we basically redesigned our whole curriculum probably about 4 years ago. And we brought in industry folks from around the country and around the world. We talked to students, we talked to alumni, and we said, what are the skills, knowledge, and dispositions students need to learn to be successful in the hospitality industry? And we basically reduced a core of 80 credits to get a hospitality degree to essentially 50 credits that really represent what hospitality is all about. And then we have 30 credits of electives. And what's happened in hospitality programs around the country is they've essentially become business schools with hotel examples. And we said, wait a minute, we don't want, certainly there's the business side, but let's be a hospitality school, but with not only business examples, but examples from sociology, examples from psychology, examples from communication. And with 30 credits of electives, let's bring in some of those other sides that help us create the whole understanding of the person as the guest. And that's how we're addressing that at UNLV.
Yeah, I think this is such an important question, right? To what degree do we have standardization? To what degree is there local nuance? And how on earth do you track that? And I think the answer, probably oversimplified, is this. Events like this, right? Conversations and really listening. Stowe and I have both taught research methods to PhD students for many years between us. We've probably done it for decades and decades. And one of the skills that you teach in learning how to, sort of as you're trying to teach folks how to obtain information from people is to listen, right? And when you're teaching 19-year-olds, they're like, yeah, I got it. I got to listen. Okay, what's next? What's the next skill? All right, here's rule number 2. Really listen, right? Okay, great. But what's next? What do I, how do I obtain information from customers, from employees, right? Listen, right? And again, it's maybe harder now in a world where we're so inundated by the cacophony of noise and social media and everything else. But I think we have some really good illustrations actually of companies here in Las Vegas that have learned, made some mistakes, certainly. But as we have exported a hospitality idea from the Las Vegas Strip to now, there are Las Vegas Strip-like resorts on 6 continents, right? And in each of those environments, whether it's taking one to South Africa and dropping one there, or down to South America or to Asia, there were moments of exchange, there were moments of mistakes, but the best illustrations, and again, I gave one earlier with the company that built this place, really listening to what Singapore was and thought of itself as this meeting point, right? That's how you win, right? It sounds like an oversimplification, and it probably is, but it's just so crucial, right?
So I got to ask the questions I came here to get from these 2 experts. Are there questions anybody has that you'd like to throw at us? Okay.
Don't be like students who have 1,000 questions but are afraid to ask.
Yes.
So
yes.
Go ahead and we can ask, or you can ask anything. Yes.
Hi, so I'm Diana Mitrovic with Nevada Governor's Office of Economic Development International Trade Team. So what about the exchange at the cultural and the business level and seizing the next possible opportunity to connect with China or the US and China, perhaps in Dubai during the Expo, 2020 Expo?
So what are the opportunities?
Yeah, the opportunities if China cannot travel right now to the United States until we lift all the travel bans.
Well, and that's for folks like Billy to help us figure out. We certainly miss the Chinese tourist in this community, and it's very noticeable, and something genuine is missing, right? And it's only through reestablishing contexts, like you said, through things like trade missions, right, which our governor's office has long promoted, dating back to the last 2 governors. And once more, reaching out to like-minded individuals who are also studying and exploring tourism, which is always popular globally because tourism is almost by definition new money, right? Money that is brought from here and left here. And so there's a world's worth of folks who aspire to achieve the things that Las Vegas has achieved and to learn from them. And so you mentioned obviously the events in Dubai that's upcoming. You know, that is obviously a city that's figured out a sort of different brand, right? But one that nevertheless has become iconic for people like European soccer players, right? And the famous.
And both USA and China will have already have their pavilions over there. So that would be an opportunity how we can exchange, ideas during the COVID time.
Yeah, no doubt. Again, it's moments like this, right? It's exchanges like this. I feel like I say this a lot when I'm up at podiums, when people ask really hard questions and they say, what's the answer? And I say it's moments like this, right? It's events where you're tackling the hard questions and they don't always have simple answers, but we've got the right folks in the room going after it together. And certainly vis-a-vis US-China travel and exchange, right? This is one of those fields that's ripe for it. Especially right now, we're sort of taking a pause, right, from that exchange.
Listen, I think if you look at most of the relationship breakthroughs in history, they've come from things like ping pong, entertainment, cultural exchanges, dance groups, where it begins to break down barriers through those things that are commonly enjoyed and appreciated by everybody. And then it builds to a higher level of relationship. I mean, for, I think, economic development itself. I mean, one of the very things we got to begin with when this pandemic's over is reinstating direct air travel between mainland China and here. I mean, there's so many parts of the infrastructure that have to come together, but it is, I think, a pyramid in a building exercise. And right now we have begun that building. These folks here, this is just beginning the exercise at a really good level. It was agriculture. Now we're talking about hospitality. There are things that we can approach together. The visitor, the travelers of the world, how we deal with them is going to have to be pretty much in common because the whole world is looking to travel to Vegas or to China, exchanging information and great training by folks like these. It should be universal. And so I think the relationships will build to a point, and at some point, once economics becomes really good, governments become better too, I think, ironically.
I feel like in this entire series, one of the beautiful themes has been that sort of regardless of what's happening at the national level, there are beautiful moments at the sub-national level. There's a moment in the Cirque du Soleil down the street when the Chinese troupe performs an acrobatic performance that blows your mind, right? And that becomes beloved by an audience of ultimately millions and millions here. And that opens up hearts, right? In the way that ping pong once did, right? And it's those sort of micro moments that seem to be coming up, I think, in a lot of the panels here, right? That can be so powerful, while sometimes there's a lot of attention given to the macro moments, to the big moments. And those are important too, of course, but there's so much power in, again, the sort of everyday and the more micro level moments.
There's a great question here from what is the one piece of advice you would give hospitality firms in China with regards to attracting American tourists and vice versa?
I would say, and I'm going to go back to the word I used before, be China, be authentic. People are they're not going to China to go to Rodeo Drive or Manhattan or Tokyo or any place else. They're going to China because they have envisioned this wonderful, mystical, ancient history, culture, colors, traditions, music, et cetera, et cetera. I think there is so much power in the image we all have of visiting China. I would say that. I really think it's the only thing China needs to do to get visitors flocking there is offer China.
And do you think, Billy, I think about this a lot because I hang out with a lot of younger people, because I work at a university. Do you think that the focus on and passion for authenticity is even more true amongst the younger generation?
No question. When you look at the growth of younger visitors, the travel and younger visitors, you know, they get their information, they get their first influence, and their biggest influence is looking at their friends' pictures, whether they're posted online, and hearing from their experiences. And then their friends wear a badge, right? I went to this really cool place when I was in Beijing or Hainan or where have you. And there was this wonderful group there that we listened, play music from, you know, for over the last 400 or 500 years type of music that they've been playing. What an experience, blows my mind. They post it, they send it out. Everybody else wants to go see that too. Why? It's authentic, it's real, and it's unique to me. It's something I can brag about that I saw. Everybody sees, all due respect to the retailers, everyone sees Saks, everyone sees all the, you know, the great large shows, malls, etc. They want to have an experience that's unique and only offered there. This is for you guys. What would tell your student, what would you tell your students are 3 attributes they need to succeed in a career in hospitality? And would the same hold true to students studying in China?
Go ahead, Professor.
So I think about this question all the time because, you know, parents ask me. I think the first attribute to be successful is you have to have a passion for service and a passion for helping others and providing great experience for others. You want to generally serve and make people happy. I think that's a very important attribute. I think the second is you have to be curious. You have to just be very curious about your guests that come in. You have to understand why they're coming in. Each guest is going to be different, and really getting to know them and be curious about who they are as a person. And that curiosity comes along with that being empathetic, to understanding their needs, especially, you know, if you're traveling to a different country as a guest, you have a lot of anxiety and angst. And how does this, as an employee, you remove that angst and make that person feel comfortable? And I think the third thing is you have to really dig into the science of why consumers do the things they want to do. And I think, you know, R&R advertising, Billy, what you've done, you didn't just come up with your sayings, you've done an incredible amount of research to really understand how do we figure out what customers really want. And I think focusing on really saying that hospitality is like rocket science. And I think those are the 3 things I would think about. Bo?
I'll just be real brief because I know we're out of time. My final class, after 18 weeks with the students, I say, look, you either trust me at this point or you don't. If it were up to me, if I were czar, I would say at the point of graduation, here's your diploma, here's your passport, go. Doesn't even really matter where. I was lucky after college because I chased a stupid ball around better than most to go get to live in a country where I didn't speak the language, and it changed everything. That is so much more true in hospitality than it is in general. And I think we've been really good at UNLV, at least, at encouraging our friends to go to China.
Absolutely.
And elsewhere.
So it took me a minute to walk up here because I hope they would just keep talking. This has been so good. Thank you so much, Billy, Stowe, and Bo. It was fantastic. I learned so much, and I know that our viewers did too. My takeaway is that your work is in fact transformative. And this is how. It transforms lives. It helps people find their calling. It provides people with knowledge to make a living, and it ultimately helps bridge the understanding gap by advancing travel, tourism, hospitality. And I think you can feel really proud about that. It was just fantastic to have you today, and we really appreciate everything you do. And now I'm going to make one more set of introductions. I'm going to pass the mic back over to Andy and then Glenn to give closing remarks, and then we'll have one more final goodbye. So thank you, everybody, and I give you Andy.
Thank you, Rachel. That last panel was fantastic. I've been looking forward to that one all day. Thank you all for participating, and thank you all that have been here live, and particularly those people, the dozens and dozens of you that are watching virtually. This is our second U.S.-China dialogue. We're very proud that we are very proud of these and the partnership we have with the US Asia Institute. And you can see that face-to-face communication is critical, particularly at a time of tension between our two countries. And what better way to foster relationships between our two countries than through tourism? Face-to-face interaction, tourism, and seeing things first place kills ignorance, and ignorance is, of course, kills wisdom. So we need more interaction like this. And as the world opens up, I'm confident that things will get better. Let's be very clear that words and rhetoric do matter, and they can be very damaging. And no one can point to any problem that has ever been solved by being a talking head on Fox, CNN, or MSNBC. Problems are solved one-on-one. They're solved with face-to-face interaction. So we need to keep communicating. That's what's critical. And that's why I think these dialogues are so critically important, and why we appreciate what the US Asia Institute is doing, particularly the work of you, Glenn, Mary Sue, and Rachel. Critically important that you do this. We'd also like to thank Ambassador Sheen and his staff for their participation. Also, all of our government participants from the United States and China, as well as our private sector representatives and our friends from the university. Very, very, very important to us. Our next program for this, we're hoping to work after the first of the year. Another critical issue, as many of you know, we did agriculture in Nebraska over the spring and summer. We did tourism and hospitality and cultural exchange here. And now what really matters, most importantly, I think between the United States and China and the world, is if we'll hopefully do our next US-China dialogue on sustainability, green energy, and the environment, something that the two countries need to cooperate on, are focused on, and benefits the entire world. So again, thank you all for participating virtually. Thank you for being here in person. Thank you again for US Asia Institute, and thank you again for this great final panel. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. And this has been a most interesting discussion and productive discussion. And I just wanted to say that, it's our hope that each one of these programs now gives something to build upon, because, it's great to have this, but this is really laying a foundation for future efforts in this regard. So I would like to express the appreciation of the US Asia Institute to all those who have made this important discussion on US-China tourism, hospitality, and international exchange possible. So, of course, a special thank you to Las Vegas Sands for their warm welcome and hospitality here, and for their support of this program. And to all the speakers and panelists, as Andy said, for sharing the time and expertise that they had. And thank you for the hardworking teams behind the scenes, including the Venetian tech team, Whit Askew, Joy Burks, Madeline Palmieri of Team Subject Matter, and of course, Allison Edwards of AE Strategies. We could not have done it without all of you. And thanks to the organizing task force who spent countless hours pulling this together: JT Foley, Daryl Nirenberg, John Robert Bloom, Allison Edwards, Whit Askew, Maria Cristina Analoro, Madeline Palmieri, and Rachel McKnight. And your vision became a reality today. And lastly, thank you to Andy Aboud, Rob Goldstein, and Las Vegas Sands for making this important discussion possible. So the US Asia Institute is greatly appreciative of all of you who joined in person and virtually. We look forward to having you with us at future discussions, and we welcome your thoughts and input. Andy just mentioned the next one coming up, and we anticipate that it will happen in January of 2022 in Florida. And so we hope to look forward to seeing you there. And let me just turn it back over to Rachel with thanks for doing a great job of emceeing. Thank you, Rachel. And thank you to our panelists.
So I think we've run through our thank yous. I really can't add much except to thank Glenn and Andy for your leadership and for your passion for communication engagement in U.S.-China relations, and for everything you do to support these dialogues. This has been an amazing virtual journey exploring U.S.-China relations in the context of hospitality, tourism, and cultural exchange. And we will see you in January of 2022. Thanks to everybody, and have a wonderful day.